UFC Flyweight Champion Joshua Van will take on Tatsuro Taira at UFC 328, and today we are here to discuss the rise of the phenom from Myanmar. We were first introduced to 21-year-old Van when he took on Zalgas Zumagulov at UFC Fight Night Emmett vs. Tapuria. What really stood out to me in this fight was Van's boxing and his ability to cut the cage. Anytime Zalgas Zumagulov tried to circle away from Van was in his face throwing punches. According to the commentary, Van had just been wrestling for 6 months leading up to this fight, but his takedown defense looked amazing. Zalgas managed to land just one takedown in the first round, which got him 1 minute 10 seconds of control time, and he won that round. But Van managed to come back and win the next two rounds with his pressure, his body work, his boxing, and his takedown defense. This is a split decision, but it wasn't really a split decision. It was definitely unanimous. Joshua Van won the last two rounds. In his next fight, Joshua Van faced off against Mexico's Kevin Bojas. And in this fight, he definitely showed an ability to fight back from adversity. Borjas knocked him down on his ass in the first round, even though it doesn't show it here, but he did. Borjas definitely got a knockdown. It wasn't the worst knockdown. Van managed to get back up pretty easily, but he did fight back from adversity and managed to win the next two rounds, winning 29-28 on the judges' scorecards. And what stood out to me in this fight was the evolution of Joshua Van. His pressure was on point as usual. He was cutting off the cage and he managed to get 2 out of 4 takedowns. This is huge because, as I told you earlier, he had just been wrestling for 6 months leading up to his debut. This was not a long time after that, and he managed to get 2 of 4 takedowns on Kevin Borjas and get himself a win on the judges' scorecards. In his next fight, he took on Felipe Boons. Boons managed to get a takedown on him in the first round. They had some good striking exchanges on the feet as well in the first round, but in round two, Boons got tired, and that is when Van smelled blood in the water. He too managed to get 2 of 6 takedowns, and he knocked down Felipe Boons with a knee and some body shots, and he managed to get the finish. This was Van's first finish in the UFC. He showed great composure, great pressure, and he managed to beat Felipe Boons. Now, this is where things got interesting, where Van lost his next fight to Charles Johnson. Now, Charles Johnson is a guy who has lost to some questionable names like Cody Durden. Cody Durden is not really a good fighter, and even here Joshua Van managed to get a takedown, which is really impressive. Charles Johnson is not an easy guy to take down, and Joshua landed 72 of 140 significant strikes. Charles Johnson landed 90 of 195 significant strikes. The first two rounds were competitive. I gave the first round to Charles Johnson, the second round to Van, but in the third round, Charles Johnson landed a right uppercut right after that, and managed to knock out Van. It wasn't the worst knockout, but it wasn't like Joshua was out. It was a good stoppage. Charles Johnson did not need to land any unnecessary follow-up shots and cause extra damage. It was good, and this was probably a good learning experience for Van, how to deal with veterans like Charles Johnson, who can give him some problems. Now, as you know, Charles Johnson is probably the biggest flyweight in the division. Joshua Van is not the biggest flyweight in the division. I don't think Joshua Van will be able to per se go up to 135 and find much success. The guys there are going to be too big for him. Marab is definitely, for example, is going to be a really big guy for him, very thick. But this was definitely a learning experience for Joshua Van. In his next fight, Joshua faced Puro Shekali Edgar Sherez. This was also a great fight. Edgar Sherez hurt Joshua Van in the first round, which got him round one. But in the next two rounds, Joshua Van got Edgar Sherez tired with his pressure and his ability to control the cage. He also managed to get 3 takedowns, 4 minutes, 26 seconds of control time. And that's what I've been telling you all. Joshua Van has an underrated takedown and grappling game. And he showed it in this fight. He showed it in the fight against Boons. He showed it in the fight against Bohas. And this guy, and you can see here, you can see his evolution here. His boxing is improving, his body work is improving, but so is his grappling game. He's being able to defend takedowns much better. He defended a bunch of takedowns against Felipe Boons, and even here and Borjas also tried to take him down a few times, tried to clinch with him, but Joshua Van was having none of it. He manages to shuck these guys off, put the pressure on them, and get these wins on the judges' scorecards. In his next fight, he took on Cody Durden. Now, this, as you can see here, there was a 30-26 scorecard. He got a 10-8 in one of those rounds. There was a 29-28. Who is this Mike Bell? Not a good scorecard, and 30-27 by Ron. This Ron McCarthy guy seems to be one of the better judges in the game. I think he scores most of the fights as they should be scored. I think he's John McCarthy's son. Can I hope someone can tell me, is this guy John McCarthy's son? I don't know, but Cody Durden got 2 of 8 takedowns, but they were he barely managed to get any control time or any damage off. And when Joshua Van was on the feet, he threw 304 significant strikes, landed 165 of them. It shows here that Durden too landed 70 of 217 significant strikes, but most of them bounced off Van's shoulders, his forearms. Some of them hit the top of his head. They didn't really hit the button at all. And while Cody Durden isn't that good, these matches were invaluable experience for Joshua Van. He got very comfortable in the octagon. He went 3 rounds again and again, which equipped him to go 5 rounds in the future, though he hasn't been 5 rounds yet, but I imagine he can, because this guy is a hell of an athlete. Yeah, another thing which stood out to me is Joshua Van is a hell of an athlete, and his cardio. He's never heavy breathing. He's always administering his energy very efficiently, and you can see it in these fights. If you all go back and check out these fights are a good blueprint for how upcoming fighters should fight, because he doesn't rush in for a finish. He's very patient. He doesn't lunge with his chin in the air. None of that. Very tight. He finds the right distance to throw shots from, and you can see it in this fight. This was a very weird fight. Raid to Surya did not throw many punches at all. He went for 21 takedowns, barely landed anything over 3 rounds, and Joshua Van was just peppering him, defending takedowns. And as I told you all earlier, these matches were invaluable experiences for Van, and this will prove to be a great asset for him as he goes on to face a formidable grappler like Tatsuro Taira, who is going to try and take him down. But Joshua Van has the game to defend takedowns, land damage, and win these fights. Joshua Van is not a guy who hunts for a finish. If the finish, like as you can see, he's not gotten many finishes, and in many of these cases there were instances where he could have sat down on some of his punches and maybe pushed for a finish. For example, against Cody Durden, where Cody Durden was so fucking tired, he couldn't even move, and Joshua Van just kept on peppering him with shots, moving out of the way of Cody Durden's punches, defended the takedowns, made Cody Durden very hesitant, made him shoot bad shots, got him tired, and won those fights. This guy, even though he's just 24 years old, he has veteran instincts, and he reminds me a lot of Peter Yan in a way. He doesn't push anything, he doesn't force anything, he just lets things happen and wins these fights. And as you can see here, clean performance, 30-27 on all 3 judges' scorecards. And this was the standout performance for Joshua Van against the veteran Bruno Silva. Now, Bruno Silva while he's not the best fighter in the flyweight division, he is not a schmuck by any means. He's a very good fighter. And Joshua Van made easy work of him. Knocked him down in the first round with a left hook, right hook, left hook combination. Knocked him down in round 2 with a short uppercut. And in the third round, kept on hitting him with great punches, good body work. This guy, his shots to the body are amazing. A lot of time you see fighters, their opponents are standing in front of them with a high guard and they keep on hitting the guard. Joshua Van doesn't do any of that shit. If he sees that he's not finding the body, he will dig. If he's not finding the head, he'll continuously dig to the body and hurt his opponents that way, keep on winning these rounds. And that's what you saw here. And he lets the finish come. He didn't force anything here either. Whenever Bruno Silva made mistakes, he capitalized on them and won this fight via TKO in round 3. Now, this was one of the best fights of the UFC you will ever see. Joshua versus Brandon Royval. Amazing fight. As you can see here, Brandon Royval landed 216 of 468 significant strikes, and Joshua landed 209 of 311 significant strikes. But what stood out here was Joshua Van's power, and that's where you see the evolution of the game. He was sitting down hard on his punches in this fight. While Brandon Royval was touching him, Joshua Van was landing big shots on him. And if you haven't seen this fight, I'm sure if you're watching this you must have. But if you haven't, and you want to introduce if you want to introduce your friends to the UFC, and they are on the fence about should I watch, should I not watch, show them this fight and I guarantee you they will be fans for life. This was a fucking war, and Joshua Van showed heart. And while some of the judges have given Brandon Royval 1 round, I think they gave him round 2, but I don't think they should have given. I think Joshua Van won all 3 rounds with his power, and while Brandon Royval too got his shots in, Joshua Van's punches just had a different effect. And in the last round, in the dying moments, you saw that Joshua Van landed those side kicks to the knee, which got Royval frustrated. And when he tried to brawl with Van, he got knocked down, which secured the fight for Joshua Van. And in his next fight, he fought Alejandro Pantoja for the flyweight title, and we all know what happened here. This fight lasted just 26 seconds. Pantoja threw a kick and landed badly on his elbow, and I think that dislocated his elbow. I think he had an interview with Ariel Hawani recently where he said it wasn't a break, it was a dislocation. So I hope we can run this fight back. Even in those 24 seconds, you could see that Pantoja versus Van was gonna be a fucking war, and I hope they run this fight back sometime in the future. Maybe if Joshua wins, I think they'll definitely run this fight back. Even if Tara wins, I hope this happens in the future. And now, moving forward, Joshua Van is probably one of the most talented fighters to have ever fought in the UFC. And if he continues this way, I can see him maybe eclipse Demetrius Johnson's claim to be the best flyweight of all times. And I think if he beats in his next 3 fights, if this guy manages to beat Tara, Manel Cap, Pantoja, and maybe if Loner Kavanagh rises up the ranks, if he manages to beat these 4 names, man, it's going to be very hard to argue that he's not the best flyweight we have ever seen. The flyweight division, of course, there's always a plethora of talent coming up, and we'll see what's next for Joshua Van. And I'm so excited for this. It's always a pleasure to see this guy fight. He's probably one of my favorite fighters in the UFC right now. And let me know what you guys think. This was my review of Joshua Van's UFC career so far. I'll see you all soon. Peace out.